Hi legends, welcome to a journey through the myths of the most powerful gods and goddesses from ancient times. We'll explore the epic contrasts between deities from different cultures, each ruling over different realms and forces. We begin with Zeus, Odin, and Ra, the mighty kings of the gods in Greek, Norse, and Egyptian mythologies. Then we'll turn to Hera, Frigg, and Hathor, the revered queens of heaven, who represent divine rulership, love, and motherhood. In the realm of war, Ares, Tyr, and Set bring chaos and destruction, while the gods of love and desire, Eros, Freyr, and Hathor, embody beauty and passion. Tricksters like Hermes, Loki, and Thoth, masters of cunning and wit, stand in contrast to creators like Prometheus, Ymir, and Khnum, who forged the world in their hands. Through these epic rivalries, kings versus queens, war versus love, tricksters versus creators, we'll explore how these gods shape their worlds and the lives of mortals. Prepare to witness the clash of ancient powers, each vying for their place in history. We're talking about three of the most powerful and famous gods from ancient myths: Zeus, Odin, and Ra. These guys weren't just any gods. They were the big bosses, the kings of their pantheons. Zeus ruled over the Greek gods on Mount Olympus. Odin was the main man of the Norse gods in Asgard. Each of these divine kings had their own unique powers, personalities, and wild stories. So, who would win in a battle of the god kings? Which one was the most powerful? The wisest? The most beloved by their people? That's what we're here to find out. We'll compare their origins, their powers, their weapons, and their greatest deeds. We'll look at how they ruled their fellow gods and how they interacted with humans. By the end of this video, you'll have a good idea of what made each of these god kings special, and maybe you'll even have a favorite. So sit back, relax, and let's start our journey through the realms of these legendary deities. Let's kick things off by looking at where these god kings came from and how they rose to power. Zeus was born to the Titans, Cronus and Rhea. Now, Cronus had a nasty habit of eating his kids because he was afraid they'd overthrow him. Talk about family issues. But Rhea managed to save baby Zeus by tricking Cronus into swallowing a rock instead. Zeus grew up in secret and eventually came back to defeat his dad and free his siblings. After a big war called the Titanomachy, Zeus and his brothers divided up the world. Zeus got the sky and became the ruler of Mount Olympus. He was known as the father of gods and men, and was often shown as a bearded, powerful-looking guy holding a lightning bolt. Odin's origin story is a bit different. In Norse mythology, he and his brothers, Vili and Ve, were the sons of Bor and the giantess Bestla. These three brothers created the world from the body of the giant Ymir. Odin became the chief of the Aesir gods and ruled from his hall, Valhalla, in Asgard. Odin was often depicted as an old man with one eye. He traded the other for wisdom, wearing a cloak and a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a spear called Gungnir and was accompanied by two ravens, Hugin and Munin, who brought him news from all over the world. Ra's origin is the most mysterious of the three. In some Egyptian myths, he created himself from the chaos at the beginning of time. In others, he emerged from a lotus flower that bloomed in the primordial waters. Either way, Ra was seen as the self-created god, who then went on to create everything else. Ra was usually shown as a man with the head of a falcon, wearing a sun disk on his head. He was believed to travel across the sky in a boat during the day, bringing light to the world, and through the underworld at night, fighting off evil spirits. Now that we know where they came from, let's compare their powers and abilities. Zeus was the god of the sky, lightning, thunder, law, order, and justice. His most famous power was his ability to throw lightning bolts, which he used to punish wrongdoers or show his anger. He could control the weather, causing storms or clear skies as he pleased. Zeus was also known for his strength and his ability to shapeshift. He often transformed into animals or other forms to seduce mortal women, which got him into a lot of trouble with his wife, Hera. He had the power to grant immortality and could see everything that happened on Earth. Odin was associated with wisdom, poetry, death, divination, and magic. He was known as the All-Father and was believed to have sacrificed one of his eyes to gain cosmic knowledge. This made him the wisest of all the gods. Odin's magical powers were impressive. He could shapeshift, travel between worlds, and understand the language of animals. He was also a master of runic magic and could use spells to heal, harm, or gain knowledge. His spear, Gungnir, never missed its target. One of Odin's unique abilities was that he could send his consciousness out in the form of animals while his body remained in a trance-like state. This allowed him to gather information and spy on his enemies. Ra's powers were closely tied to the sun and creation itself. As the sun god, he brought light and warmth to the world each day. He was believed to have created all forms of life by speaking their secret names. Ra had the power to see everything that happened in the world he created. He was also a shapeshifter and could take on many forms. One of his most important roles was fighting off the serpent Apophis each night to ensure the sun would rise again in the morning. Ra was associated with fire and heat and was believed to have the power to both create and destroy. He was also linked to the idea of divine kingship, with pharaohs claiming to be his descendants. Now let's look at how these god kings ruled and interacted with other gods and humans. Zeus ruled the Greek gods from Mount Olympus. He was like a powerful but unpredictable king. The other gods had to obey him, but they often tried to trick him or work around his orders. Zeus would punish gods who disobeyed him, sometimes in pretty harsh ways. With humans, Zeus was a mix of helpful and harmful. He cared about justice and would punish people who broke sacred laws or didn't show proper respect to the gods. But he was also known for his affairs with mortal women, which often ended badly for the women involved. Zeus didn't usually directly interfere in human affairs. Instead, he would send other gods or heroes to carry out his will. He was known to disguise himself as a human, sometimes to test people's hospitality. Odin's rule was different from Zeus's. While he was the chief god, the Norse pantheon was less hierarchical. Odin was more of a first among equals, respected for his wisdom and magical powers, rather than ruling by force. Odin was obsessed with gaining knowledge and power to prevent Ragnarok, the prophesied end of the gods. This sometimes led him to make decisions that seemed strange or even cruel to others. With humans, Odin was known to wander the world in disguise, testing people's wisdom and generosity. He was the patron of rulers, poets, and outcasts. Odin valued bravery above all and was said to choose half of those who died in battle to join him in Valhalla. Unlike Zeus, Odin was willing to sacrifice and suffer to gain power or knowledge. He hung himself from the world tree for 9 days and nights to gain the knowledge of runes. Ra's rule was the most absolute of the three. In Egyptian mythology, he was seen as the creator and sustainer of the universe. Other gods were often viewed as aspects or manifestations of Ra. Ra's daily journey across the sky and through the underworld was central to Egyptian religion. Other gods played roles in helping Ra on this journey, like fighting off enemies or steering his boat. With humans, Ra was seen as a benevolent creator god who provided light and life. The pharaohs claimed to be Ra's representatives on Earth, or even his direct descendants. This gave them immense authority. Ra was believed to be directly involved in the affairs of Egypt. Good harvests, victory in war, and the flooding of the Nile were all attributed to Ra's favor. However, as time went on, Ra became more distant from human affairs, leaving more of the day-to-day rule to other gods. One of Zeus's most impressive feats was defeating the monster Typhon, a huge and terrifying creature that threatened to overthrow the gods. Zeus battled Typhon and eventually trapped him under Mount Etna. Odin's most famous deed was probably his self-sacrifice to gain the knowledge of runes. He hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights, wounded by his own spear. Ra's most important deed was his daily journey across the sky, bringing light to the world and then through the underworld at night. This cycle was seen as crucial for maintaining the order of the universe. So, who was the greatest among them? Well, that's not an easy question to answer. Each of these god kings was supreme in their own mythology, reflecting the values and worldviews of the cultures that worshipped them. Zeus embodied the Greek ideals of power and justice. Odin represented the Norse quest for wisdom and preparation for fate, and Ra symbolized the Egyptian concepts of cosmic order and renewal. As we explore the rulers of the heavens, Zeus, Odin, and Ra each embody supreme power in their respective pantheons. These gods not only govern their domains but also represent the ultimate authority, justice, and law in Greek, Norse, and Egyptian cultures. But behind every powerful king, there's a queen who complements and balances that power. Next, we delve into the equally mighty queens of the heavens. Hera from Greek mythology, Frigg from Norse mythology, and Hathor from Egyptian mythology. These celestial queens weren't just sidekicks to their godly husbands, they were forces to be reckoned with in their own right. So, buckle up as we take a journey through time and across cultures to explore the stories, powers, and lasting impact of Hera, Frigg, and Hathor. We'll look at what made each of these goddesses unique, how they compared to one another, and why they still capture our imaginations today. Let's start our tale in ancient Greece. where the mighty Hera reigned as queen of the gods in ancient mythology. Part 1. Hera, the jealous queen of Olympus. Picture this: Mount Olympus, home of the Greek gods. It's a place of unimaginable beauty, with golden palaces and gardens blooming with ambrosia. And at the top of it all sits Hera, queen of the gods in all her regal glory. Hera was known for her stunning beauty. They say she had big, soft eyes that could melt your heart, or freeze you in terror if you got on her bad side. Her favorite animals were the peacock and the cow, both symbols of pride and nurturing. But don't let that fool you. Hera was no pushover. As the wife of Zeus, king of the gods, Hera had a lot on her plate. Zeus wasn't exactly the most faithful husband. In fact, he was always chasing after other goddesses and mortal women. This didn't sit well with Hera, and it's a big part of her story. Hera became known for her jealousy and her fierce protection of her marriage. When Zeus would have affairs, Hera would often take out her anger on the unfortunate women he pursued. She turned one of Zeus's lovers, Io, into a cow and sent a gadfly to constantly sting her. Another time, she delayed the birth of Heracles, aka Hercules, out of spite because he was Zeus's son with a mortal woman. But Hera wasn't just about revenge. She was also the goddess of marriage, childbirth, and family. Greek women would pray to Hera for help in these areas of life. She was seen as a protector of women, especially in the vulnerable times of pregnancy and childbirth. One of my favorite stories about Hera shows both her vengeful and protective sides. There was a queen named Leto who was pregnant with Zeus's twins, Apollo and Artemis. Hera was so angry that she forbade any place on solid earth from allowing Leto to give birth there. Poor Leto wandered around, rejected from everywhere, until she found the floating island of Delos. Since it wasn't attached to the earth, Leto could finally have her babies there. Hera had some serious powers too. She could bless marriages, curse those who angered her, and even grant immortality. In one myth, she even tricked Zeus and overthrew him for a while, with the help of other gods. It took the giant Briareus to free Zeus and put him back on the throne. Despite all the drama with Zeus, Hera stuck by him. She was a queen, after all, and she took her role seriously. In art, you'll often see Hera depicted wearing a crown, holding a royal scepter, and looking every bit the powerful ruler she was. Now let's head north to the cold lands of Scandinavia, where another queen of heaven held sway. Frigg, the all-knowing Norse mother. Imagine misty fjords, snow-capped mountains, and dense forests. This is the realm of the Norse gods, and at the heart of it all is Asgard, their heavenly home. Here we find Frigg, wife of Odin and queen of the Aesir gods. Frigg had a calm and wise presence. She was associated with the sky, and people said you could see her spinning the clouds in her great spinning wheel. As Odin's wife, Frigg shared in his rule over Asgard. But while Odin was often away seeking knowledge or preparing for the final battle of Ragnarok, Frigg stayed home and kept things running smoothly. She was the only other god allowed to sit on Odin's high seat, Lidskjalf, from which she could see everything happening in all the 9 worlds. Frigg was known for her wisdom and her ability to see the future. But here's the catch: she never revealed what she saw. This led to some pretty intense moments, like when she knew her son Balder was in danger, but couldn't prevent his death. Speaking of Balder, the story of his death is one of the most famous myths involving Frigg. Balder started having nightmares about dying, which worried everyone because he was beloved by all the gods. Frigg went around and made everything in the world swear an oath not to harm Balder. She thought she'd covered everything, but she missed one tiny plant, mistletoe. The trickster god Loki found out about this and made an arrow out of mistletoe. He then tricked Balder's blind brother Hoder into shooting Balder with this arrow, killing him. Frigg was devastated. She tried everything to bring Balder back from the dead, even sending a messenger to the underworld to beg for his return. But it was no use. Balder had to stay in the realm of the dead until after Ragnarok. This story shows us a different side of Frigg compared to Hera. While Hera often lashed out in anger, Frigg's response to losing her son was deep sorrow and determined action. She didn't seek revenge, but instead did everything in her power to make things right. Frigg was the goddess of motherhood, marriage, and household management. Norse women would pray to her for help in childbirth and for protection of their families. She was also associated with love and fertility. One of Frigg's unique abilities was her skill in weaving magical objects. She could weave clouds and even fate itself. It was said that she knew the destiny of every person, but never shared this knowledge. Frigg had her own hall in Asgard called Fensalir, which means marsh halls. This was where she spent most of her time, overseeing the affairs of gods and mortals alike. Unlike Hera, who was often involved in the dramas and conflicts of Olympus, Frigg preferred to work behind the scenes, using her wisdom and foresight to guide events. Now let's journey south to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt, where our third queen of heaven awaits, golden goddess of joy. Picture the shimmering waters of the Nile, mighty pyramids rising from the desert sands, and a blazing sun overhead. This is the world of ancient Egypt, and one of its most beloved goddesses was Hathor, the Golden One. Hathor was often depicted as a beautiful woman with the ears or head of a cow. Sometimes she was shown as a cow entirely, symbolizing her nurturing nature. Her most famous representation was the sistrum, a musical rattle used in her worship. Unlike Hera and Frigg, who were mainly associated with one male god, Hathor had connections to several major Egyptian deities. She was sometimes called the daughter of Ra, the sun god. Other times, she was the wife of Horus, the sky god. And in some stories, she was partnered with Khnum, the god of the Nile. Hathor was a goddess of many things: love, beauty, music, dance, fertility, and joy. She was called the Mistress of Heaven and the Lady of Stars. One of the most famous stories about Hathor shows her fierce side. Ra, the sun god, was angry with humanity for not following his laws. He sent Hathor as his eye to punish the people. But Hathor got a little too into her role. She transformed into Sekhmet, a lion-headed goddess of war, and started slaughtering humans left and right. Ra realized things had gone too far and wanted to stop the bloodshed. He had a bunch of beard dyed red to look like blood, and poured it out for Sekhmet to find. She drank it all, got drunk, and fell asleep. When she woke up, she had transformed back into the gentle Hathor, and the killing stopped. This story shows us that even the kindest deities could have a dangerous side, but mostly, Hathor was known for bringing happiness and pleasure to both gods and humans. She was the patroness of parties and celebrations. In fact, one of her titles was Lady of Drunkenness. Hathor played a big role in ancient Egyptian ideas about the afterlife. She was often shown welcoming the dead into the next world, offering them food and drink. She was also believed to help guide the sun god Ra on his nightly journey through the underworld. As a goddess of fertility and childbirth, Hathor was very important to Egyptian women. They would pray to her for help conceiving children and for safe deliveries. She was also associated with beauty and love, kind of like the Egyptian version of Aphrodite. One of Hathor's coolest powers was her ability to bring joy and heal people through music and dance. Her priests and priestesses would use rattles, drums, and other instruments in their rituals to invoke her presence and blessings. Hathor had several important temples dedicated to her throughout Egypt. One of the most famous was at Dendera, where a huge festival was held each year to celebrate her marriage to Horus. Now that we've met our three heavenly queens, let's see how they stack up against each other. Their relationships with mortals were different. Hera could be either helpful or harmful to humans, depending on whether they had pleased or angered her. Frigg was generally seen as a protective figure, especially for women and families. Hathor was beloved by the Egyptians and was seen as a source of life, love, and happiness. Hera, Frigg, and Hathor stand alongside their god kings as powerful figures of divine femininity. Each of these queens represents different aspects of life. Hera as the protector of marriage, Frigg as the goddess of foresight and motherhood, and Hathor as the embodiment of love, fertility, and music. Yet in the same way that the gods of the heavens represent order, there are also gods of war who embody chaos and conflict. Let's move from the peace of the heavens to the battlefields of mythology. Ancient gods of war, chaos, and destruction from three ancient cultures. In one corner, we have the hot-headed Greek war god Ares, in another, the Norse god Tyr, and rounding out our trio is Set, the cunning Egyptian god of chaos. These powerful deities shaped the beliefs and cultures of their people for thousands of years. But how do they stack up against each other? What made them tick? And what can they tell us about how different ancient societies viewed war, justice, and disorder? Ares, the Greek god of war. Let's begin our divine journey with Ares, the Greek god of war. Picture a battlefield in ancient Greece, the air thick with dust and the cries of warriors. Above it all, a figure looms, muscular, armored, with a spear in one hand and a shield in the other. This is Ares, and he's in his element. Ares was born of Zeus and Hera, the king and queen of the Greek gods. But don't let his royal parentage fool you. Ares was far from the favorite child on Mount Olympus. In fact, he was often seen as the black sheep of the divine family. Why, you ask? Well, Ares embodied the raw, brutal aspects of war. He reveled in bloodshed, delighted in the clash of arms, and thrived on the chaos of the battlefield. To Ares, war wasn't about strategy or noble causes. It was about the thrill of combat, the rush of victory, and the primal urge to conquer. This bloodthirsty nature made Ares a complex figure in Greek mythology. On one hand, he was respected and feared as a powerful god. Warriors would pray to him for strength and courage before battle. But on the other hand, he was often viewed with distaste, even by his fellow gods. There's a fascinating story that illustrates this perfectly. During the Trojan War, Ares decided to join the fray, because of course he did. It was a war after all. He sided with the Trojans, much to the annoyance of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Athena, supporting the Greeks, decided to teach Ares a lesson. She guided the Greek hero Diomedes to attack Ares directly. Can you imagine? A mortal attacking a god. But with Athena's help, Diomedes actually managed to wound Ares. The war god, not used to being on the receiving end of violence, fled the battlefield, roaring in pain and anger. He raced back to Mount Olympus to complain to Zeus, but received little sympathy. Zeus, exasperated, told him, "Do not come whining here, you double-faced liar. You are the most hateful to me of all the gods who hold Olympus. Forever quarreling is dear to your heart, wars and battles." This story tells us a lot about how the ancient Greeks viewed Ares. He was powerful and dangerous, yes, but also somewhat childish and unpredictable. He represented the aspects of war that were seen as necessary but not necessarily admirable. The bloodlust, the chaos, the raw violence. But it would be a mistake to dismiss Ares as a simple brute. Like war itself, he was a complex figure. He was also associated with courage and standing up for one's beliefs. In some stories, he's portrayed as a protector of the innocent, using his strength to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. One of the most interesting aspects of Ares is his relationship with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Despite being married to Hephaestus, Aphrodite carried on a long-standing affair with Ares. This pairing of love and war might seem strange at first, but it reflects a deep truth about human nature. That passion and conflict often go hand in hand. An interesting fact about Ares that often gets overlooked is his connection to agriculture. In some parts of Greece, particularly in Sparta, Ares was also seen as a protector of crops. This might seem odd for a war god, but it makes sense when you consider that in ancient times, warfare and agriculture were closely linked. Armies needed food to sustain them, and conquering new fertile lands was often a motivation for war. As we wrap up our exploration of Ares, it's worth noting how he compares to the war gods of other cultures. Unlike Tyr or Set, whom we'll discuss later, Ares was rarely associated with justice or cosmic order. He was a force of nature, unpredictable and violent, much like war itself. In many ways, Ares represents a very human view of war, not as a noble endeavor or a cosmic struggle, but as a chaotic, violent, yet sometimes necessary part of life. He reminds us that conflict, for better or worse, is an integral part of the human experience. As we move on to our next deity, Tyr, keep Ares in mind. How will the Norse god of war and justice compare to this Greek embodiment of combat and chaos? The answer might surprise you. Tyr, the Norse god of justice and glory. In the frosty realms of Norse mythology, here among the fjords and forests of Scandinavia, we find a god of war quite different from the hot-blooded Ares. This is Tyr, and his story is one of courage, sacrifice, and above all, justice. Picture a great hall in Asgard, home of the Norse gods. Warriors feast and drink, celebrating their victories. At the head of the table sits a figure of quiet strength, one-handed, yet commanding respect from all around him. This is Tyr, and his missing hand tells a tale that lies at the very heart of Norse mythology. But before we dive into that story, let's understand who Tyr was to the Norse people. Unlike Ares, who embodied the chaotic and violent aspects of war, Tyr represented its nobler side. He was a god of justice, of glory earned through righteous battle, and of oaths and honor. In many ways, Tyr was the ideal that Norse warriors strive to embody, brave, just, and true to their word. Tyr's origins are somewhat shrouded in mystery. In some tales, he's described as the son of Odin, the All-Father. In others, he's seen as a descendant of the giants, ancient enemies of the gods. This ambiguity adds to Tyr's complex nature. He's a figure who bridges different worlds, much like how justice must balance competing interests. Now, let's talk about that missing hand, shall we? It's time for one of the most dramatic tales in all of Norse mythology. Gather round and let me tell you about the binding of Fenrir. Fenrir was a monstrous wolf, prophesied to bring about the end of the world. As he grew larger and more dangerous, the gods decided he needed to be restrained. They had the dwarves craft a magical ribbon called Gleipnir, made from impossible things: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. When the gods presented this ribbon to Fenrir, the wolf was suspicious. He agreed to be bound only if one of the gods would place their hand in his mouth as a gesture of good faith. Can you guess who stepped forward? That's right, it was Tyr. Imagine the scene. The great wolf Fenrir, his jaws wide open, teeth gleaming. And there's Tyr, calmly placing his right hand between those terrible fangs. The other gods bound Fenrir with Gleipnir, and when the wolf realized he couldn't break free, he bit down, severing Tyr's hand. This moment is crucial to understanding Tyr. He knew he would lose his hand, yet he did it anyway. Why? Because it was necessary for the greater good, and because he had given his word. This act embodies everything Tyr stands for: sacrifice, honor, and the willingness to pay a personal price for justice and the welfare of others. From that day forward, Tyr was known as the one-handed god. But rather than diminishing him, this sacrifice only increased the respect and admiration he commanded among gods and humans alike. Unlike Ares, who was often viewed with a mix of fear and distaste, Tyr was highly revered in Norse culture. He was seen as a god who could be relied upon, whose judgment was fair and whose word was unbreakable. In a world where oaths and honor were of utmost importance, Tyr stood as the ultimate guarantor of justice. Interestingly, while Tyr is associated with war, he's not primarily a god of battle in the way Ares is. Instead, Tyr embodies the concept of just war, conflict undertaken for right and necessary reasons, governed by laws and codes of honor. He was invoked not just by warriors, but by anyone seeking justice or trying to uphold the law. This connection to law and justice is reflected in Tyr's name itself. In Old Norse, Tyr is related to the Proto-Germanic word tiwaz, which is also the source of our modern English word Tuesday. Literally, Tyr's Day. This same root gives us the Latin words deus, god, and dies, day, showing Tyr's ancient and widespread influence. An interesting fact about Tyr that's often overlooked is his connection to the Thing, the Norse legislative assembly and court. In these gatherings, disputes were settled, laws were made, and justice was administered. Tyr was seen as the divine overseer of these proceedings, ensuring fairness and upholding the sanctity of oaths sworn there. As we reflect on Tyr, we see a god who represents a very different aspect of war and conflict than Ares. Where Ares is chaos and bloodlust, Tyr is order and justice. Where Ares revels in the heat of battle, Tyr is concerned with the reasons for fighting and the rules that govern conflict. In many ways, Tyr represents an ideal, the notion that even in war, there can be honor, justice, and noble sacrifice. He reminds us that sometimes standing up for what's right requires personal cost, but that such sacrifices are worthy and remembered. As we prepare to move on to our final deities set, keep both Ares and Tyr in mind. We've seen war as chaotic violence and as a tool for justice. But what happens when we add chaos itself into the mix? The answer lies in the shifting sands of Egypt, where Set awaits. Set, the Egyptian god of chaos and desert storms, in the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt. Here, along the life-giving Nile, we encounter a god who defies easy categorization, a deity as enigmatic and unpredictable as the desert itself. This is Set, and his tale is one of chaos, ambition, and the harsh realities of nature. Picture the vast Egyptian desert at twilight. The sun sets, painting the sky in hues of red and gold. A hot wind whips up the sand, and in the gathering gloom, you catch a glimpse of a figure. Tall, lean, with the head of an unknown animal. This is Set, and like the desert he rules, he's both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Set's role in Egyptian mythology is complex and evolved over thousands of years. Unlike Ares or Tyr, who were primarily associated with war, Set's domain was much broader. He was the god of chaos, yes, but also of storms, desert, and foreign lands. In many ways, Set represented everything that was strange, dangerous, or outside the orderly world of Egyptian civilization. Let's start with Set's most famous story, his conflict with Osiris and Horus. This tale is at the heart of Egyptian mythology and tells us much about how the Egyptians viewed Set. Once upon a time, Osiris ruled as king of Egypt with his wife Isis by his side. Set, Osiris's brother, grew jealous of Osiris's power and popularity. Consumed by envy, Set hatched a devious plan. He threw a grand feast and presented a beautiful chest, promising to give it to anyone who could fit inside perfectly. When Osiris tried, Set slammed the lid shut, sealed it, and threw it into the Nile. Isis, heartbroken, searched the world for Osiris's body. When she finally found it, she used her magical powers to resurrect him long enough to conceive a son, Horus. Osiris then became the ruler of the underworld, while Horus grew up to challenge Set for the throne of Egypt. The battle between Horus and Set lasted for years, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. During their struggles, Set tore out one of Horus's eyes, while Horus castrated Set. Eventually, the other gods intervened, and Horus was declared the rightful king. This myth is rich with symbolism. Osiris represents the fertile Nile Valley and the cycle of death and rebirth. Horus symbolizes the rightful order of things and the pharaoh's divine right to rule. And Set represents the harsh desert, the dangerous unknown, and the forces that threaten order and stability. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite being cast as the villain in this central myth, Set wasn't always seen as evil. In fact, for much of Egyptian history, Set was revered as a powerful and necessary god. You see, to the ancient Egyptians, chaos wasn't just a negative force, it was also the source of change, strength, and even creation. Without chaos, there could be no order. Without the harsh desert, the fertile Nile Valley wouldn't seem so miraculous. Set was a protector, as well as a destroyer. Every night, he would stand at the prow of Ra's solar boat, fighting off Apophis, the serpent of chaos who threatened to plunge the world into eternal darkness. In this role, Set used his chaotic nature for good, turning his strength against an even greater threat. An interesting fact about Set is his association with foreign lands and peoples. As Egypt came into increasing contact and conflict with neighboring civilizations, Set became linked with these outsiders. His red coloring was associated with the desert and with the red-haired people of the Mediterranean. During times of foreign occupation, such as the Hyksos period, Set was often elevated to a principal deity. Set's animal is another fascinating aspect of his mythology. Unlike other Egyptian gods, who were associated with recognizable animals like falcons, cats, or jackals, Set's animal is a mystery. It's usually depicted with a curved snout, erect ears, and a forked tail. Some scholars think it might be a stylized aardvark or a composite of several desert animals. This unique creature adds to Set's aura of strangeness and unpredictability. In many ways, Set represents a more nuanced view of conflict and chaos than either Ares or Tyr. He's not just a god of war, but of all the unpredictable, disruptive forces in life. In our modern world, far removed from the time when these gods were actively worshipped, we can still see echoes of the ideas they represent. The raw aggression of Ares, the principled stand of Tyr, the unpredictable disruptive force of Set, all of these are still part of how we experience and think about conflict and change in our lives and societies. Ares, Tyr, and Set symbolize the raw force of battle and destruction. Ares, the impulsive god of war, thrives in chaos, while Tyr, the Norse god of justice and war, represents honor and sacrifice. Set, the Egyptian god of storms and disorder, stands as the embodiment of chaos itself. These gods wage eternal war, yet the world they fight for is also shaped by forces of love and beauty. Now we shift from chaos to the more delicate but equally powerful domain of love. Eros, the Greek god of love and desire. Let's start our journey in ancient Greece, where we meet Eros, the god of love and desire. Now, you might be more familiar with his Roman counterpart, Cupid, but trust me, Eros is the original love guru. Picture this. A young, handsome god with a bow and arrow, flying around and causing mayhem wherever he goes. That's our boy Eros. But don't let his youthful appearance fool you. This guy is as old as time itself. In the beginning, Eros was seen as a primordial god, one of the first beings to exist in the universe. He was the force that brought order to chaos, the spark that ignited life itself. Pretty impressive for a guy who's often depicted as a chubby baby, right? But as time went on, the Greeks started to see Eros a bit differently. He became known as the son of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Talk about family pressure. Can you imagine having the goddess of love as your mom? That's like being the child of a supermodel and a relationship counselor rolled into one. Now, Eros had a pretty cool job. He was responsible for making people fall in love. And how did he do this? With his trusty bow and arrows, of course. But these weren't your ordinary arrows. Oh no, these were magical arrows that could make anyone fall in love with the first person they saw after being struck. Imagine the chaos. One minute you're minding your own business, the next you're head over heels for the first person who crosses your path. It's like a cosmic version of a dating app, but with way less swiping and a lot more divine intervention. But Eros wasn't always accurate with his aim. Sometimes he'd cause people to fall in love with the wrong person, leading to all sorts of drama and heartache. It's like he was the original writer for every romantic comedy ever made. One of the most famous stories about Eros is his own love story. Ironic, isn't it? The god of love falling in love himself. It all started when Eros' mother, Aphrodite, got jealous of a mortal woman named Psyche, who was said to be even more beautiful than the goddess herself. Aphrodite, being the drama queen she was, sent Eros to make Psyche fall in love with the ugliest creature on earth. But plot twist. Eros accidentally pricked himself with his own arrow and fell madly in love with Psyche instead. Now, being a god, Eros couldn't just walk up to Psyche and ask her out on a date. No, he had to make things complicated. He visited her only at night, in complete darkness, and made her promise never to try to see his face. Talk about a weird dating arrangement. Of course, curiosity got the better of Psyche, as it often does in these myths, and one night she lit a lamp to see who her mysterious lover was. Eros, feeling betrayed, flew away. But don't worry, folks. After a series of trials and tribulations, the two lovers were finally reunited and lived happily ever after. Even gods love a happy ending. This story of Eros and Psyche is more than just a cute love tale. It represents the journey of the human soul, that's what Psyche means in Greek, in its search for divine love. Deep stuff, right? But Eros wasn't all about romantic love. He was also associated with friendship and even the love between family members. In fact, the Greeks had different words for different types of love, and Eros was just one of them. There was also agape, unconditional love, philia, friendship love, and storge, familial love. Eros represented passionate, romantic love, the kind that makes your heart race and your palms sweat. In art, Eros was often depicted as a handsome young man with wings, carrying a bow and arrow. But as time went on, particularly in Roman art, he started to be portrayed as a chubby baby, the Cupid we know today. Talk about a glow down. Eros' influence wasn't limited to just making people fall in love. He was also associated with fertility and the continuation of the human race. After all, what's love without a little bit of, well, you know, the birds and the bees, as they say. In some versions of the myth, Eros had a brother named Anteros, who was the god of requited love. Together they balanced each other out. Eros ignited passion, while Anteros ensured that love was returned. It's like they were the original relationship counselors. So what can we learn from Eros? Well, for one, love can be unpredictable. It can strike when you least expect it, and sometimes with the person you least expect. But also, love requires trust and understanding. Just like Psyche had to trust Eros in the dark, sometimes we need to have faith in love, even when we can't see where it's leading us. Now let's leave the warm Mediterranean and head north to the frosty lands of the Vikings. Here we meet Freyr, the Norse god of love, fertility, and abundance. And let me tell you, this guy is a far cry from the chubby cherub we just left behind. Picture a tall, handsome god with golden hair and a smile that could melt the harshest Nordic winter. That's our man Freyr. But don't let his good looks fool you. This god was as much about prosperity and peace as he was about love and fertility. Freyr was part of the Vanir, a group of gods associated with nature, fertility, and wisdom. He was the twin brother of Freya, talk about keeping it in the family. And together they were like the power couple of Norse mythology, minus the actual couple part. Because, you know, siblings. Now, Freyr had some pretty cool powers. He could control the weather, making the sunshine and the rain fall. This made him a big hit with farmers who relied on good weather for their crops. It's like he was the original weather app, but way more reliable and much better looking. But Freyr wasn't just about making plants grow. He was also associated with peace and prosperity. In fact, he was so peaceful that he gave away his sword, a big deal for a Viking god. For love. Talk about putting love before war. The story goes that one day Freyr sat on Odin's throne, a big no-no in the god world, and saw a beautiful giantess named Gerd. He immediately fell head over heels in love. But there was a problem. Gerd lived in Jotunheim, the land of the giants, and wasn't interested in Freyr. Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Freyr sent his servant, Skirnir, to woo Gerd on his behalf. Skirnir, being a good wingman, tried everything. Bribes, threats, even curses. Finally, Gerd agreed to meet Freyr. Here's where it gets interesting. To convince Skirnir to go on this dangerous mission, Freyr gave him his magical sword, a weapon so powerful it could fight on its own. This sword was super important, especially since it was prophesied that Freyr would need it during Ragnarok, the end of the world. But Freyr didn't care about all that. He was so in love that he was willing to give up his most prized possession. It's like trading your car, house, and life savings for a date with your crush. Talk about being lovesick. This story shows us a different side of love compared to Eros. While Eros was all about instant attraction and passionate desire, Freyr's love was more about sacrifice and dedication. He was willing to give up his most valuable possession and potentially his future for love. That's some serious commitment. But Freyr wasn't just about romantic love. He was also associated with other types of love. The love of family, the love of community, and even self-love. In Norse society, Freyr was seen as a god who brought people together, fostering harmony and prosperity. One of the coolest things about Freyr was his connection to nature. He was often associated with the wild boar, a symbol of strength and fertility. In fact, one of his prized possessions was a boar named Gullinbursti, whose bristles glowed in the dark. It's like he had his own organic nightlight. Freyr was also linked to ships and seafaring. He owned a magical ship called Skivbladnir, which could be folded up like a piece of cloth and carried in a pocket when not in use. Talk about convenient travel. It's like he had the world's first foldable yacht. In terms of love and fertility, Freyr was the go-to god for couples wanting to start a family. People would often pray to him for healthy children and bountiful harvests. He was like a divine fertility clinic, an agricultural advisor rolled into one. One of the most interesting aspects of Freyr's cult was the practice of sacred marriages. In these rituals, a human would symbolically marry the god to ensure fertility and prosperity for the community. It was like a cosmic wedding, minus the expensive catering and awkward dance floor moments. Freyr's influence was so great that even after Christianity came to Scandinavia, people continued to worship him in secret. There are stories of farmers keeping small figurines of Freyr hidden in their barns well into the Middle Ages. Talk about brand loyalty. So what can we learn from Freyr? Well, for one, love often requires sacrifice. Sometimes we have to give up something important to us for the sake of love. But also, love isn't just about romance. It's about community, family, and the world around us. Freyr reminds us that love can bring prosperity and peace, not just to individuals but to entire societies. Now let's leave the chilly north and head to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt. Here we meet Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, motherhood, and so much more. And let me tell you, this lady puts the multi in multitasking. Hathor was one of the most important and popular goddesses in the Egyptian Pantheon. She was so beloved that she was worshipped for over 3,000 years. That's like having a pop star who stays famous from the time of ancient Rome until today. Now, let's talk about Hathor and love. Unlike Eros with his mischievous arrows or Freyr with his lovesick sacrifices, Hathor represented a more nurturing, maternal kind of love. She was the patroness of lovers, but she was also there to support women through childbirth and motherhood. Hathor was generally seen as a benevolent goddess. She was often called the Lady of Drunkenness, not because she was a party animal, though I'm sure she knew how to have a good time, but because she could intoxicate people with love and joy. Hathor was also associated with beauty and adornment. She was the patroness of cosmetics and jewelry, believed to enhance the wearer's attractiveness. Ancient Egyptian women would often wear amulets of Hathor for protection and to increase their allure. It's like having a divine makeover artist on speed dial. One of the most interesting aspects of Hathor's cult was the importance of music and dance. Priestesses of Hathor were skilled musicians and dancers, using their arts to honor the goddess and bring joy to the people. Imagine a divine concert where the performers are all priestesses and the lead singer is a cow-headed goddess. Now that's a show I'd pay to see. So what can we learn from Hathor? Well, for one, love comes in many forms: romantic, maternal, fierce, gentle. Hathor reminds us that love is complex and multifaceted, just like she is. Together, these three deities give us a rich, nuanced picture of love. Please subscribe to support the channel, like, share, and comment your thoughts on the nature of love. While war and chaos tear worlds apart, love and desire weave them back together. Eros, the Greek god of love, sparks passion. Freyr, the Norse god of fertility, ensures harmony in nature and relationships. And Hathor, the Egyptian goddess of love, straddles both fertility and maternal care. These forces of attraction and creation contrast the destruction of war, but love too can be a battlefield. Now, we turn to gods who use cunning and trickery to influence both love and war, masters of deception, who bend the rules of the cosmos. We're diving into the fascinating world of trickster deities from different mythologies. Imagine a cosmic game of chess where the pieces don't just move, they shapeshift, tell jokes, and occasionally steal the whole board. Hermes from Greek mythology, Loki from Norse legends, and Thoth from ancient Egyptian lore. They challenge authority, bend rules, and often teach us valuable lessons through their cunning exploits. Let's start our trickster tour with Hermes, the jack of all trades in the Greek pantheon. Born to Zeus and Maya, Hermes hit the ground running, literally. Legend has it that within hours of his birth, this precocious god was already up to no good. Imagine a divine toddler with a mischievous glint in his eye and winged sandals on his tiny feet. That's baby Hermes for you, and his first order of business? Stealing cattle. But not just any cattle. We're talking about the prized herd of his half-brother Apollo, the god of music and prophecy. Picture the scene. Under the cover of night, little Hermes sneaks out of his cradle, swipes Apollo's cattle, and leads them backward to hide their tracks. It's like a cosmic game of who stole the cookie from the cookie jar, only with divine beings and bovines. When confronted, Hermes plays innocent, batting his eyelashes and looking as angelic as a newborn god can. It's a classic move from the trickster's playbook. Create chaos, then feign innocence. But Hermes isn't just about causing trouble. He's a problem solver too. When Apollo discovers the theft and confronts him, our quick-thinking trickster doesn't just apologize. He invents the liar on the spot as a peace offering. Talk about turning lemons into lemonade. This clever maneuver not only gets Hermes out of hot water, but also earns him Apollo's admiration. It's a perfect example of how tricksters often use their wits to transform potential disasters into opportunities. As Hermes grows up, he doesn't lose his penchant for mischief, but he channels it into more respectable, divine duties. In Greek mythology, he becomes the messenger of the gods, zipping between Mount Olympus and the mortal world faster than you can say, express delivery. With his winged sandals, think of them as the original jetpacks, and his caduceus, a staff that's part GPS, part master key, Hermes is the go-to god for all things involving movement and exchange. But here's where it gets interesting. Hermes doesn't just deliver messages. He's also the patron god of travelers, merchants, and yes, thieves. It's like having a divine figure who's part FedEx driver, part business guru, and part con artist. This multifaceted nature is what makes Hermes such a fascinating trickster figure. He operates in the gray areas, the in-between spaces where rules are flexible and quick thinking is prized above all. Interesting fact, he's the only Olympian god who can freely enter and exit the underworld. Think about that for a second. In a mythological world full of strict boundaries, Hermes has an all-access pass to every realm. He's like that one friend who somehow knows the bouncer at every club in town. This unique ability makes Hermes not just a trickster, but a crucial mediator between different worlds, the living and the dead, the divine and the mortal. This role as a boundary crosser is central to understanding Hermes as a trickster god. He's not bound by the same rules as others, which allows him to sidestep conventions and find creative solutions to problems. It's no wonder that ancient Greeks saw him as the patron of both merchants and thieves, two professions that require quick wit and the ability to operate in gray areas. Hermes' fluid nature and clever tricks make him more than just a troublemaker. He's a catalyst for change, a bender of rules that sometimes need bending, and a reminder that a little mischief can lead to unexpected innovations. As we move on to our next trickster god, keep in mind Hermes' swift feet and swifter mind. They set a high bar for divine mischief-making in all cultures. Now, let's journey north to the frosty realms of Norse mythology, where we meet a trickster who makes Hermes look like a Boy Scout. Imagine someone who's part stand-up comedian, part con artist, and part supervillain, all rolled into one charismatic package. That's Loki for you. Unlike Hermes, who was born into the pantheon of gods in Greek mythology, Loki is an outsider, a Jotun, or giant, who somehow managed to schmooze his way into the good graces of the Aesir gods. It's like a wolf convincing a flock of sheep that he's just another woolly friend until he isn't. Loki's signature move? Shapeshifting. This guy changes forms more often than most of us change clothes. One moment he's a dashing god, the next he's a mare, yes, a female horse. It's like he's playing a cosmic game of Guess Who, where he's always switching the cards. But Loki's real power lies in his silver tongue. He's the ultimate smooth talker, capable of charming his way out of and often into the stickiest of situations. Picture the most persuasive salesperson you've ever met, multiply that charm by 1,000, add a dash of mischief and a pinch of malice, and you're getting close to Loki's level of persuasion. Let's take a look at one of Loki's most famous tricks: the building of Asgard's walls. The gods want a fancy new wall around Asgard, their heavenly realm. A mysterious builder offers to do the job in just 3 seasons, but his price is steep: the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya's hand in marriage. The gods, being the shrewd negotiators they are, agree, but only if he can finish the job in 1 season, with no help except from his stallion. Here's where it gets wild. The builder is actually making impressive progress, and the gods start to panic. They turn to Loki, basically saying, "You got us into this mess, now get us out." Our trickster extraordinaire hatches a plan that's equal parts brilliant and bizarre. He shapeshifts into a mare, told you he had range, and lures away the builder's stallion. Without his equine helper, the builder fails to meet the deadline, the gods renege on the deal, and Asgard gets its walls on the cheap. But wait, there's more. Months later, Loki returns, with an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. Yes, you guessed it, Loki, in mare form, had a close encounter of the equine kind with the builder's stallion. The result? The fastest horse in all the 9 worlds, which Loki gifted to Odin. Talk about turning a trick into a treat. Not all of Loki's pranks end so productively, though. Take the case of Sif's golden hair. In a moment of what we can only assume was extreme boredom or petty jealousy, Loki decides to shave off the beautiful golden hair of Thor's wife, Sif. It's like giving a bad haircut to the prom queen if the prom queen was married to the god of thunder. Needless to say, Thor is not amused. He threatens to break every bone in Loki's body, and given that Thor's favorite pastime is smashing things with his hammer, this is no idle threat. Our trickster, his silver tongue working overtime, promises to replace Sif's hair with something even better. He convinces the dwarves to forge hair of pure gold that grows like real hair. Crisis averted? Not quite. In true Loki fashion, he turns the hair replacement errand into a convoluted scheme that results in him acquiring magical treasures for the gods, and getting his lips sewn shut as punishment for his trickery. Interesting fact, in Norse mythology, he's considered both a help and a hindrance to the gods, often in the same story. In fact, many of the magical items the gods rely on, including Thor's hammer Mjolnir, were only obtained because of Loki's schemes. It's like having a friend who constantly creates problems, but is also the only one who can solve them. This duality makes Loki more than just a simple trickster. He's a complex figure who embodies chaos in its purest form. This complexity is what sets Loki apart from many other trickster gods. He's not just mischievous, he's often malicious. Yet, the gods keep him around because his cunning is as useful as it is dangerous. Loki is the wild card in the Norse pantheon, the joker in the divine deck, capable of saving the day or bringing about utter ruin. Now let's sail down the Nile to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt, where we meet our third and final trickster god, Thoth. But hold on to your papyrus scrolls, folks, because Thoth is a trickster with a twist. Imagine a god with the head of an ibis, that's a long-beaked bird, for those of us who skipped ornithology class, perched on a human body. In one hand, he holds a writing palette, in the other, a reed pen. This isn't your typical prankster. Thoth, in Egyptian Pantheon, the god of wisdom, writing, and magic. It's like if you combined a university professor, a master magician, and a tech guru, then gave the mixture an avian makeover. Now you might be wondering, wait a minute, how does a god of wisdom fit into our trickster trio? Well, my legends, that's where things get interesting. Thoth's tricks aren't about causing chaos or stirring up trouble. Instead, he uses his vast intelligence and magical know-how to outsmart other gods and bend the rules of the universe itself. He's less pie in the face and more hacked the matrix. Let's look at one of Thoth's most famous tricks, the one where he won moonlight for the children of Nut, the sky goddess. Picture this. Nut is pregnant with 5 children who will become important Egyptian gods. But Ra, the sun god of ancient Egypt, has decreed that she can't give birth on any day of the year. Talk about a divine dilemma. Enter Thoth, with a glint in his ibis eye and a plan up his feathered sleeve. He challenges the moon god Khonsu to a game of Senet, think ancient Egyptian chess. The stakes? If Thoth wins, he gets some of the moon's light. Spoiler alert, Thoth wins, a lot. He ends up winning enough moonlight to create 5 extra days that exist outside the regular calendar. Voila! Nut can now give birth to her children on these bonus days, neatly sidestepping Ra's decree. It's like finding a loophole in the cosmic fine print. This trick showcases Thoth's brand of trickery, using intellect and strategy to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. But Thoth isn't done revolutionizing time. Oh no. He takes those 5 extra days and uses them to create the 365-day calendar. That's right, folks. According to Egyptian mythology, we owe our current calendar system to a bird-headed god's gambling skills. Next time you're late for an appointment, you can blame it on Thoth's trickery. Thoth's role as a divine scribe adds another layer to his trickster nature. As the inventor of writing, he holds the power of knowledge and communication. In a world where information is power, Thoth is the ultimate power broker. He records the judgments in the afterlife, essentially deciding who gets a thumbs up or thumbs down in the great beyond. But here's where Thoth's trickster nature really shines. He doesn't just record knowledge, he guards it. In some myths, he's said to have hidden his most powerful secrets in books that he's scattered across the earth. It's like a divine scavenger hunt where the prize is forbidden knowledge. This aspect of Thoth turns the whole world into a puzzle waiting to be solved, a trick waiting to be unraveled. Interesting fact, in some versions of Egyptian mythology, he's credited with creating himself through the power of language. That's right, Thoth literally talked himself into existence. It's the ultimate fake-it-till-you-make-it strategy, taken to cosmic proportions. This self-creation myth underscores Thoth's connection to the power of words, and highlights how his brand of trickery is tied to the manipulation of reality through knowledge and language. This self-made aspect of Thoth sets him apart from our other tricksters. While Hermes was born into the Greek Pantheon, and Loki schmoozed his way into the Norse god's good graces, or maybe he didn't, Thoth bootstrapped himself into divinity. It's a reminder that in the realm of tricksters, the power of the mind can be just as formidable as physical might or shape-shifting abilities. As we conclude our exploration of Thoth, consider this. In a pantheon full of gods representing natural forces and human emotions, Thoth stands out as the personification of intellect and wisdom. His tricks and triumphs remind the readers that knowledge itself can be the greatest tool or weapon in both the divine and mortal realms. Hermes, our fleet-footed Greek, is all about quick thinking and quicker feet. He's the guy who can talk his way out of a tight spot faster than you can say winged sandals. Loki, on the other hand, is the master of disguise and deception. He doesn't just bend the rules, he twists them into pretzels, then convinces you the pretzel was your idea all along. And then we have Thoth, the cerebral Egyptian, whose tricks are more like cosmic chess moves. He's playing 4D chess, while everyone else is still figuring out checkers. Hermes, Loki, and Thoth are the tricksters who operate in the shadows, manipulating events with wit, cunning, and intelligence. Hermes, the Greek messenger, is both a guide and a thief, while Loki, the Norse shapeshifter, weaves chaos with his mischief. Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, uses his intellect to outsmart others. These tricksters challenge the established order, setting the stage for those who command the more mysterious forces of magic and power. Next, we explore the goddesses who embody strength and magic, Hecate, Freya, and Sekhmet. It's a dark night in ancient Greece. The moon is high, and the wind whispers through the trees. At a crossroads, where 3 paths meet, stands a woman. She holds a torch in each hand, lighting up the night. This is Hecate, the goddess of magic, crossroads, and the night. Hecate wasn't like other Greek gods. She didn't live on Mount Olympus with Zeus and his family. Instead, she preferred the world of humans. She walked among them, helping those who needed her most. People said Hecate knew all the secrets of magic and could teach them to others if she wanted. Now, let me tell you a story about Hecate that shows just how powerful and kind she could be. There was once a young girl named Mira who lived in a small Greek village. Mira's grandmother was very sick, and no one could help her. One night, Mira decided to go to the crossroads near her village. She'd heard that Hecate sometimes appeared there to help people. Mira waited all night, shivering in the cold. Just as she was about to give up, she saw 3 lights coming towards her. It was Hecate. The goddess asked Mira why she was there. When Mira told her about her sick grandmother, Hecate smiled. She taught Mira a special healing spell and gave her some magical herbs. Thanks to Hecate's help, Mira's grandmother got better. This story shows why people loved Hecate. She wasn't just powerful, she was also willing to help regular folks. That's why many Greeks left food for her at crossroads. They hoped she'd bless them with good luck or teach them some magic. But Hecate wasn't all sweetness and light. She had a darker side too. Some people were scared of her because she ruled over ghosts and the dead. They said she could send scary dreams or lead people astray if they weren't careful. That's why it was important to stay on her good side. Hecate was also known for her animal friends. She often had dogs with her, which is why some people left dog treats at her shrines. She was also linked to snakes and horses. These animals were seen as magical and a bit spooky, just like Hecate herself. One of the coolest things about Hecate was her torch. It wasn't just for lighting the way. People said it could burn away evil and light up hidden truths. Some stories even said Hecate used her torch to guide good souls to the afterlife. As time went on, Hecate became more and more popular. Even when Greece was taken over by Rome, people still worshipped her. She was seen as a protector of homes and families. People would put statues of her near their front doors to keep bad luck away. Now, let's travel north, to the cold lands of the Vikings. Here, we meet a goddess who's as fierce as she is beautiful. This is Freya, and she's not your average love goddess. Sure, she rules over love and beauty, but she's also a warrior who rides into battle. Imagine a woman with long golden hair, wearing a cloak made of falcon feathers. Around her neck is a magical necklace that shines like the sun. This is Freya, and she's riding in a chariot pulled by 2 big cats. Yes, you heard that right, cats. The Vikings thought cats were magical animals, and who better to have them than their magical goddess? Let me tell you a story about Freya that shows just how clever and brave she was. One day, a giant stole Thor's hammer. Thor was the god of thunder, and without his hammer, he couldn't protect Asgard. That's where the gods lived. The giant said he'd only give the hammer back if he could marry Freya. Now, Freya wasn't about to marry some smelly old giant, but she came up with a plan. She told Thor to dress up as her, wearing a wedding dress and veil. Thor wasn't happy about it, but he did it. When they got to the giant's home, the giant was fooled. As soon as he brought out the hammer to give to his bride, Thor grabbed it and smashed the giant. This story shows how Freya wasn't just beautiful, she was smart and brave too. She wasn't afraid to stand up to giants or come up with tricky plans to save the day. Freya was also the first to teach the other gods about magic. Her type of magic was called satyr, and it was very powerful. It could be used to see the future or change someone's fate. Some people even said Freya could shapeshift into different animals. But Freya wasn't all about magic and trickery. She was also a fierce warrior. In fact, she got to choose half of the warriors who died in battle to come live in her hall, Folkvanger. The other half went to Odin's hall, Valhalla. In Folkvanger, the warriors would feast and celebrate, waiting for the day when they'd be needed to fight again. Freya had a softer side too. She was the goddess of love and beauty, after all. People would pray to her for help in finding love or having children. She was said to cry tears of gold when she was sad, which is why gold was sometimes called Freya's tears in Old Norse poems. One of Freya's most famous possessions was her necklace, called Brisingamen. The story goes that she got it from 4 dwarves, who were the best craftsmen in the world. They agreed to make it for her, but only if she spent 1 night with each of them. Freya agreed, which shows she wasn't afraid to go after what she wanted. Freya was so important to the Vikings that they named one of the days of the week after her. In English, we call it Friday, but in some Scandinavian languages, it's still called Freya's Day. What's really interesting about Freya is how she brings together so many different ideas. She's a love goddess, but also a war goddess. She's beautiful, but also fierce. She uses magic, but she's not afraid of a good fight. This shows that the Vikings didn't think people or goddesses had to be just one thing. You could be loving and warlike, beautiful and strong, all at the same time. Now let's head south to the hot sands of Egypt. Here, we meet a goddess who's so powerful, even the other gods are a bit scared of her. This is Sekhmet, and she's not messing around. Picture a woman with the head of a lioness, wearing a red dress. The dress is red to hide the blood of her enemies. Yeah, Sekhmet doesn't play nice. On her head is a sun disk, showing she's connected to Ra, the sun god. In her hand, she holds an ankh, the Egyptian symbol of life. This is Sekhmet, and she's ready for action. Let me tell you a story about Sekhmet that shows just how powerful and dangerous she could be. Once, Ra was angry at humans for not following his laws. He sent Sekhmet to punish them, but Sekhmet got carried away. She started killing everyone, not just the bad people. She enjoyed it so much that she wouldn't stop. Ra realized he'd made a mistake. He didn't want all humans to die, so he came up with a plan. He had his priests make a huge amount of beer and dye it red so it looked like blood. They poured it all over the fields. When Sekhmet saw it, she thought it was blood and started drinking it. She got so drunk that she fell asleep for 3 days. When she woke up, her rage was gone and humanity was saved. This story shows why people both respected and feared Sekhmet. She was incredibly powerful, but that power could be dangerous if it wasn't controlled. But Sekhmet wasn't just about destruction. She was also a goddess of healing. In fact, her priests were some of the best doctors in ancient Egypt. People believed that Sekhmet could send plagues, but she could also cure them. So if you got sick, you'd pray to Sekhmet to make you better. Sekhmet was also connected to the hot desert winds. People said that when these winds blew, it was Sekhmet's breath. This shows how the Egyptians saw natural forces as connected to their gods. Despite her fierce nature, Sekhmet was a very popular goddess. Pharaohs often showed themselves with Sekhmet, saying she gave them power in battle. Some pharaohs even called themselves the son of Sekhmet, hoping to be as strong and fierce as she was. What's really cool about Sekhmet is how she shows that healing and destruction can come from the same source. She could be terribly violent, but she could also cure diseases. This reminded people that nature and life itself has both creative and destructive powers. Now that we've met all three goddesses, let's compare them. What do they have in common? What's different about them? All three goddesses are powerful and a bit scary. Hecate rules over magic and the night. Freya can see the future and choose who lives or dies in battle, and Sekhmet can destroy the whole world if she wants to. This shows that in many ancient cultures, goddesses weren't just soft and nurturing, they could be just as powerful and dangerous as male gods. They're all connected to magic in some way. Hecate is the goddess of magic, Freya teaches magic to the other gods, and Sekhmet's priests use magical healing. This shows how important magic was in these ancient cultures. All three are also protectors in their own way. Hecate protects homes and crossroads, Freya protects warriors, and Sekhmet protects Egypt from its enemies. But they can also be dangerous if you get on their bad side. One big difference is in how they use their power. Hecate tends to help individuals, teaching them magic or guiding them. Freya is more involved with the other gods, playing a big role in their stories. Sekhmet is the most destructive, capable of wiping out all of humanity. Another difference is in their personalities. Hecate is mysterious and wise, preferring to work behind the scenes. Freya is more outgoing, not afraid to trick giants or go after what she wants. Sekhmet is the most unpredictable, capable of great violence but also great healing. From the tricksters who manipulate fate through cunning, we now turn to goddesses who wield far greater power. Together, these goddesses blur the lines between life, death, and the mystical forces that govern both. But while they control the balance of power, others are responsible for the very creation of the world itself. Let's now explore the ancient myths of creation. We've got Prometheus from Greek mythology, Ymir from Norse legends, and Khnum from ancient Egyptian tales. Each of these figures has a unique story about how life came to be. Let's start our journey in ancient Greece, where the story of Prometheus unfolds. Picture a world where gods ruled from Mount Olympus and humans were just a twinkle in the eye of creation. This is where Prometheus, a titan with a big heart and an even bigger brain, steps onto the stage. Prometheus wasn't your average titan. While most of his family was busy fighting Zeus and the Olympian gods, Prometheus had other ideas. He looked down at the earth and thought, you know what this place needs? Humans. And so, our crafty titan rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Now, how exactly did Prometheus create humans? Well, the story goes that he took some clay from the earth and shaped it into figures. Imagine a divine pottery class, if you will. Prometheus molded these clay figures with care, giving them form and features. But clay figures alone don't make living, breathing humans, right? This is where Athena, the goddess of wisdom, comes in. She was impressed by Prometheus's work and decided to help out. She breathed life into these clay figures, turning them from lifeless statues into living, thinking beings. But Prometheus didn't stop there. He looked at his newly created humans and thought, these folks need an edge. So in a move that would change everything, Prometheus decided to give humans the gift of fire. Now this wasn't just about keeping warm or making s'mores. Fire represented knowledge, technology, and progress. The thing is, fire was supposed to be for the gods only. Zeus, the big boss of Olympus, wasn't too keen on sharing. But Prometheus, clever as ever, snuck up to Olympus, stole a spark from the sun chariot, and brought it back to Earth, hidden in a hollow fennel stalk. Talk about a mythological heist. When Zeus found out, he was furious. He punished Prometheus by chaining him to a rock where an eagle would eat his liver every day, only for it to grow back and be eaten again the next day. But even in his punishment, Prometheus never regretted his actions. He believed in humanity and was willing to suffer for their progress. This myth tells us a lot about how ancient Greeks viewed the creation of humanity and our relationship with the gods. Prometheus represents the rebel, the one who defies authority for the greater good. His creation of humans and gift of fire symbolize the birth of civilization and the power of knowledge. But Prometheus's story doesn't end there. In some versions of the myth, he's eventually freed by Hercules, showing that even divine punishments can be overcome. This idea of a savior figure, punished for helping humanity, has echoed through history and influenced countless stories since. So that's Prometheus, the titan who shaped humans from clay, breathed life into them with divine help, and then gave them the tools to build civilizations. Not too shabby for a day's work, right? Now let's leave the warm Mediterranean and head north to the frosty realm of Norse mythology. Here, we meet Ymir, and let me tell you, this guy gives a whole new meaning to the phrase larger than life. Imagine a time before time, a vast emptiness called Ginnungagap. On one side, you've got fiery Muspelheim, on the other, icy Niflheim. When fire and ice met in the middle, they created Myr, the first being in existence. But Ymir wasn't just any being, he was a giant. And when I say giant, I mean giant. We're talking about a creature so massive that his body would eventually become the world itself. Unlike Prometheus, who consciously created humans, Ymir's role in creation was, well, let's say it was more accidental. You see, Ymir didn't set out to create life. It just kind of happened while he was sleeping. Talk about productive naps. The story goes that as Ymir slept, he began to sweat. And from his sweat, the race of frost giants was born. But that's not all. One of his legs mated with the other leg. Yeah, you heard that right. And from that union came the race of giants. It's not exactly the birds and the bees talk you got in school, is it? But Ymir's contribution to life didn't stop there. From his armpits, stay with me here, sprang the first man and woman. I know, it sounds pretty gross. But in Norse mythology, creation often comes from unusual and sometimes icky places. It's all part of the raw, primal nature of their creation myths. Now you might be thinking, okay, so Ymir accidentally created some beings. But how did we get from a giant sweating in his sleep to the world we know? Well, that's where Odin and his brothers come in. Odin, Vili, and Ve, the first gods, looked at Ymir and thought, you know what, this guy's taking up too much space. They killed Ymir and used his body to create the world. Here's how it went down. Ymir's flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains, his hair the trees, his skull the dome of the sky, and his brains, well, they became the clouds. It's like a cosmic recycling project. The gods then took sparks from Muspelheim and set them in the sky to create the stars. They put 4 dwarves, Northri, Suthri, Austri, and Vestri, at the corners of the sky to hold it up. Talk about a heavy lifting job. But what about humans? Well, the gods weren't done yet. They found 2 trees on the beach, an ash and an elm. From these trees, they created the first man, Ask, and the first woman, Embla. Odin gave them the breath of life, Vili gave them consciousness and movement, and Ve gave them speech, hearing, and sight. So in the Norse creation story, we see a cycle of creation, destruction, and recreation. Ymir's accidental creation of giants and humans is followed by his death and the reshaping of his body into the world we know. It's a stark contrast to Prometheus's deliberate crafting of humans, showing a more chaotic and primal view of creation. This myth reflects the harsh realities of life in the Norse world. Creation isn't a peaceful, planned process, but a violent, messy affair. It also shows the interconnectedness of all things. The world is literally made from the body of the first being, suggesting that everything in creation is fundamentally linked. Ymir's story gives us a creation myth that's both awe-inspiring and a little bit weird. It's a tale of cosmic accidents, divine murder, and world-building on a scale that's hard to imagine. And let's be honest, it makes you look at clouds a little differently, doesn't it? Let's sail down the Nile to ancient Egypt. Khnum. If Prometheus was the crafty rebel and Ymir the accidental creator, Khnum is the skilled artisan of life. Picture this: a god with the head of a ram and the body of a man, sitting at a potter's wheel beside the life-giving waters of the Nile. This is Khnum, one of the earliest Egyptian gods, believed to be the creator of human bodies. Unlike Prometheus or Ymir, Khnum's creation of life wasn't a one-time event. Nope, this god was in the business of creating each and every person. Think of him as a divine assembly line, crafting humans one at a time. Here's how it worked. Khnum would take clay from the Nile, sounds a bit like Prometheus, doesn't it? And shape it on his potter's wheel. But Khnum wasn't just making simple pots or vases. He was crafting the bodies of humans and animals with incredible detail and care. Now you might be wondering, if Khnum made the bodies, where did the souls come from? Well, in Egyptian mythology, that was a team effort. After Khnum had shaped a person's body, other gods would step in. Hecate, the frog-headed goddess of fertility, would breathe life into the new body. Then Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, would write the person's fate on a piece of papyrus. But Khnum's job wasn't done after creating a person. Egyptians believed that he continued to watch over people throughout their lives, almost like a guardian angel. He was especially associated with the yearly flooding of the Nile, which brought the fertile silt that allowed crops to grow. In this way, Khnum was seen as a creator and sustainer of life. One of the coolest things about Khnum is how he was depicted in Egyptian art. You can find images of him sitting at his potter's wheel, carefully shaping a human figure or even a pharaoh. Sometimes, he's shown holding a potter's wheel on which rests a newly created child. It's a powerful image that really brings the myth to life. Khnum's role as a creator god tells us a lot about how ancient Egyptians viewed life and creation. The use of the potter's wheel symbolizes the idea of humans being carefully crafted, each one unique. It's a more personal, hands-on approach to creation compared to Prometheus's one-time crafting or Ymir's accidental spawning. The fact that Khnum used Nile clay to form humans connected people directly to the land of Egypt. It reinforced the idea that humans were intimately linked to the Nile and the cycle of floods that sustained Egyptian civilization. In a way, every person was a little piece of Egypt itself. But Khnum wasn't just about creating humans. He was also associated with the creation of the other gods, the sun and moon, and even the earth itself. In some stories, he's said to have molded the cosmic egg from which the sun god Ra emerged. Talk about a big job. Khnum's creation myth also reflects the Egyptian focus on order and continuity. Unlike the chaotic creation in Norse mythology or the rebellious act in Greek myth, Khnum's creation is a steady, ongoing process. It's a reflection of the Egyptian desire for stability and the continuation of life. One interesting aspect of Khnum's story is how it evolved over time. In later Egyptian history, Khnum became associated with the annual flooding of the Nile. People believed that he controlled the caverns where the Nile's water was stored, releasing it each year to flood the fields. This shows how creation myths can change and adapt to explain different aspects of the natural world. So, there you have it, Khnum, the divine potter, crafting each person with care and continuing to watch over them throughout their lives. It's a creation myth that emphasizes the uniqueness of each individual and the ongoing nature of creation. The Greeks with Prometheus saw creation as a deliberate act, emphasizing human-like gods and the importance of craft and skill. The Norse, through Ymir, portrayed creation as a wild, unpredictable process, reflecting their harsh and often chaotic world. The Egyptians, with Khnum, viewed creation as an ongoing, orderly process, mirroring their desire for stability and continuity. Another interesting point of comparison is the gods' relationship with their creations. Prometheus is the champion of humanity, willing to suffer eternal punishment to give them the gift of fire. He's like that cool uncle who sneaks you candy when your parents aren't looking. Ymir, well, he gets killed and dismembered to make the world, so I guess you could say he made the ultimate sacrifice, even if it wasn't voluntary. Khnum takes on more of a guardian role, watching over people throughout their lives. Let's not forget about the involvement of other gods. Prometheus gets a helping hand from Athena, who breathes life into his clay figures. Ymir's creations are reshaped by Odin and his brothers, and Khnum works as part of a team, with other gods like Heket and Thoth playing crucial roles in bringing people to life. It's also worth noting the different materials used in creation. Both Prometheus and Khnum use clay, linking humans directly to the earth. Ymir's creations come from his own body, suggesting a direct lineage between gods, giants, and humans. These different origins reflect each culture's views on humanity's place in the world and our relationship with the divine. They remind us that the question of where we come from has always fascinated humanity, leading to stories as diverse and imaginative as humanity itself. Please subscribe to support the channel. Each of these figures represents the divine act of creation, but while they forged life, others command the vast and uncontrollable forces of nature, particularly the seas. Now we descend into the depths of the waters and meet the lords of the oceans. These are the domains of three legendary gods of water, Poseidon, Njord, and Sobek. Our journey will take us from the sun-drenched shores of ancient Greece to the icy fjords of Scandinavia and finally to the scorching banks of the Nile. Along the way, we'll uncover the stories, powers, and lasting legacies of these fascinating deities. So grab your sea legs, tighten your life vest, and let's dive into the mythical waters of the ancient world. Poseidon, the tempestuous ruler of the Mediterranean. Our journey begins in ancient Greece, where the wine-dark sea stretches as far as the eye can see. Suddenly, the waters churn and froth. A massive figure rises from the depths, trident in hand, long beard dripping with seawater. This is Poseidon, lord of the seas, and he's not in a good mood. Imagine you're a Greek sailor setting out on a voyage across the Mediterranean. Your success, indeed your very survival, depends on the whims of this powerful and temperamental god. One moment, he might grant you calm seas and favorable winds. The next, he could unleash a storm that would send your ship to the bottom of the sea. Why is Poseidon so moody? Well, let's take a trip to Mount Olympus and find out. Here, we see Poseidon arguing with his brothers, Zeus and Hades. "I should be the king of the gods," Poseidon roars, shaking his trident. "I'm older than Zeus." But Zeus, with his thunderbolts and sky domain, remains firmly in charge, much to Poseidon's ongoing frustration. This family drama plays out again and again in Greek myths. When Paris of Troy snubs Poseidon in favor of Aphrodite in a divine beauty contest, Poseidon's wrath helps fuel the Trojan War. When the hero Odysseus blinds Poseidon's son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, Poseidon makes sure Odysseus' journey home takes a grueling 10 years. But Poseidon isn't all storms and shipwrecks. Let's visit Athens, where we find him competing with Athena to be the city's patron god. Poseidon strikes the ground with his trident, and a saltwater spring bursts forth. It's an impressive display, but ultimately the Athenians prefer Athena's gift of an olive tree. Poseidon's reaction? He floods the Attic plain in anger. Note to self, don't get on Poseidon's bad side. As we leave Greece, we see temples to Poseidon dotting the coastline. Fishermen and sailors leave offerings, praying for safe voyages and bountiful catches. Even on land, people respect Poseidon's power. After all, with a strike of his trident, he can cause earthquakes that shake the very foundations of the earth. Poseidon's legacy lives on, not just in the ruins of ancient temples, but in our modern imagination. From the pages of Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series to the King of the Seas in The Little Mermaid, Poseidon's influence continues to ripple through our culture, much like the waves he commands. Njord, the benevolent guardian of Norse waters. As we sail north, the warm Mediterranean gives way to the chilly waters of the North and Baltic seas. The salty sea spray carries whispers of a different sea god, Njord of the Vanir. Unlike the tempestuous Poseidon, Njord greets us with a benevolent smile. Picture him standing at the prow of a longship, his beard as white as sea foam, eyes twinkling with the wisdom of countless voyages. Where Poseidon commands fear and respect, Njord inspires trust and hope. Let's dock our ship at Noaton, Njord's seaside home. Here we find not a palace of grandeur, but a haven of peace. Ships of all sizes find safe harbor in these waters, their crews grateful for Njord's protection. Merchants and traders mill about, for Njord is not just a god of the sea, but of wealth and prosperity too. But Njord's story isn't all smooth sailing. Let's travel back in time to witness the war between the Aesir and the Vanir gods. Amid the chaos of divine battle, Njord stands as a peacemaker. When the dust settles, we see him and his children, Freyr and Freya, traveling to live with the Aesir as honored hostages, bridging the gap between the two divine families. Now, let's peek into Njord's love life. It's quite the tale. Picture a giant's daughter named Skadi arriving at the god's hall seeking vengeance for her father's death. As part of a peace settlement, she's allowed to choose a husband from among the gods, but only by looking at their feet. Skadi, hoping to snag the handsome Balder, chooses the most beautiful feet she sees. Surprise! They belong to our friend Njord. What follows is a lesson in the importance of compatibility. Njord can't stand the cold, rocky home of his new bride, while Skadi finds the screeching of seabirds at Noatun unbearable. It's a classic case of water and oil don't mix, and the two eventually go their separate ways. But Njord handles it all with his characteristic calm and wisdom. As we bid farewell to Njord, we see why the Norse people loved him so. In a harsh and unforgiving northern world, Njord represented the best of what the sea could offer. Safe travels, successful trading, and the promise of wealth and plenty. His calm demeanor and wise counsel made him a favorite among gods and mortals alike. While he might not be as famous as Thor or Odin in modern pop culture, Njord's influence can still be felt. In the resurgence of interest in Norse mythology, Njord stands as a reminder that not all powerful gods are wrathful or warlike. Sometimes, the most enduring strength comes wrapped in kindness and wisdom. Our final destination takes us to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt. As we sail down the Nile, the lifeblood of this ancient civilization, we catch glimpses of scaly forms sliding beneath the water's surface. These are crocodiles, both feared and revered by the Egyptians, and sacred to the god we're here to meet, Sobek. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile during the annual flood. The waters rise, bringing with them the promise of fertile soil and abundant crops. But there's danger too. Crocodiles, normally confined to the river, can now range further afield. In this mix of promise and peril, we find Sobek. Let's visit the Temple of Sobek in Crocodilopolis. Yes, that was a real place. Here, we see something that might shock our modern sensibilities. Live crocodiles kept in sacred pools, adorned with gold and precious jewels. These are no mere reptiles, but living embodiments of Sobek himself. As we explore the temple, the walls come alive with images of Sobek. Sometimes he appears as a full crocodile, other times as a man with a crocodile's head. In one scene, we see him emerging from the primordial waters at the dawn of creation, laying the egg from which the world hatched. In another, he stands alongside the sun god Ra, helping to battle the serpent of chaos, Apophis. But Sobek's nature is as shifting as the Nile itself. In some stories, he's a friend and protector of the other gods. In others, he's a threat, needing to be kept in check. This dual nature reflects the Egyptian view of the crocodile. A dangerous predator, yes, but also a symbol of the pharaoh's power and the Nile's fertility. Speaking of pharaohs, let's peek into the royal palace. Here we see rulers adopting Sobek's name as part of their own, hoping to channel his strength and ferocity. Sobek-hotep, Sobek-neferu. These names proclaimed the pharaoh's divine right to rule, their connection to the primal forces of nature that Sobek represented. As our journey down the Nile comes to an end, we understand why Sobek was so important to the ancient Egyptians. In a land where life depended entirely on the ebb and flow of the river, Sobek embodied both the danger and the bounty of their environment. He was a reminder of nature's power, the cycle of death and rebirth, and the delicate balance between order and chaos. While Sobek might not be as well known today as gods like Osiris or Anubis, his influence persists. Continued fascination with Egyptian mythology, Sobek represents a complex understanding of nature, not simply good or evil, but powerful, necessary, and worthy of respect. The oceans are untamed and mysterious, ruled by gods who embody their wild and unpredictable nature. Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, controls the waves and storms, while Njord, the Norse god of the sea and wind, brings prosperity to sailors and fishermen. Sobek, the crocodile god of the Nile, represents both the life-giving and destructive power of water in Egyptian mythology. These ancient lords hold the fate of mortals in their hands, commanding the waters that sustain and threaten civilizations. From the powerful lords of the seas, we now turn to deities who connect life, death, and nature in profound ways. Beyond the reach of these stern deities, there are gods who dance to a different rhythm, gods who delight in the chaos of a festival, the thrill of the unknown, and the magic of celebration. Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and ecstatic revelry. Freya, the Norse god of fertility and the vibrant force of nature. And Anubis, the Egyptian guardian of souls who unveils the mysteries of life and death. Each embody a spirit that transforms the ordinary into something enchanting. Today, we'll dive into their tales, discovering how they bring color, music, and the allure of the unknown into our world, reminding us that life is meant to be celebrated. This is the domain of Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and religious ecstasy. But don't be fooled by his jovial reputation. Dionysus is a god of profound contradictions and hidden depths. Imagine yourself in a small Greek village, nestled among rolling hills covered with vineyards. It's the time of the grape harvest, and the entire community is buzzing with excitement. As night falls, torches are lit, and the festivities begin. Women and men, their faces flushed with wine and excitement, dance wildly to the rhythm of drums and flutes. This is no ordinary party. It's a Dionysian ritual, where the boundaries between the mortal and divine blur. At the heart of this frenzied celebration stands a figure that seems to shimmer between human and divine form. Sometimes he appears as a beautiful youth with flowing locks adorned with ivy leaves, other times as a mature, bearded man with a crown of vine leaves. This is Dionysus himself, the god who brings both liberation and madness. But who is Dionysus, really? His story begins with a divine scandal. Zeus, the king of the gods, fell in love with a mortal woman named Semele. Hera, Zeus's jealous wife, tricked Semele into asking Zeus to reveal himself in his true divine form. The sight of Zeus's thunderbolt-wielding glory was too much for Semele, and she was burned to ashes. But Zeus managed to save their unborn child, sewing the fetus into his own thigh to complete the gestation. This unusual birth set the tone for Dionysus's entire existence, a god caught between worlds, never fully belonging to either the divine or mortal realm. Perhaps this is why he became the patron of theater, that magical art form where reality and illusion dance together. As Dionysus grew, he discovered the secrets of winemaking and brought this gift to humanity. But this was no mere beverage. In Dionysus's hands, wine became a sacrament, a key to unlocking the doors of perception and communing with the divine. Imagine yourself taking part in one of the god's sacred rituals. As the wine flows freely, you feel your everyday concerns melting away. The music seems to penetrate your very being, and suddenly you're moving in ways you never thought possible. Your senses heighten, colors become more vivid, and for a brief, glorious moment, you feel connected to everything and everyone around you. This is the essence of Dionysian ecstasy, a state where the individual ego dissolves, and one experiences a profound sense of unity with the universe. But beware, Dionysus is not a god to be trifled with. Those who resist his call to abandon control and embrace the chaotic flow of life often meet tragic ends. Take the story of King Pentheus, who tried to ban the worship of Dionysus in Thebes. The god drove the women of the city into a frenzy, and Pentheus's own mother, in her madness, tore her son limb from limb. This dark side of Dionysus reminds us that his gifts come with a price. The ecstasy he offers can lead to madness, the liberation to destruction. He is a god of paradoxes. Life and death, joy and sorrow, wisdom and folly all swirl together in his intoxicating presence. Here's an interesting fact that might surprise you. Despite his association with wild parties, Dionysus was also revered as a god of resurrection and rebirth. In some myths, he descends into the underworld to rescue his mortal mother Semele and bring her back to life. This connection with death and renewal links him to our other gods in unexpected ways, as we'll soon discover. As we leave the Dionysian revel behind, take a moment to reflect on the god's teachings. In a world that often demands rigid control and conformity, perhaps we could all use a touch of Dionysian abandon now and then. When was the last time you truly let go, lost yourself in music or dance, and felt that spark of divine madness? Let's journey north to the mist-shrouded fjords and verdant forests of Scandinavia. Here we encounter a god who at first glance seems the very antithesis of wild Dionysus. This is Freyr, the Norse god of peace, fertility, and prosperity. But don't be fooled by his serene demeanor. Freyr's power runs as deep as the ancient roots of Yggdrasil itself. Imagine yourself standing in a lush meadow on a warm summer's day. The air is alive with the buzzing of bees and the sweet scent of wildflowers. In the distance, golden fields of barley sway gently in the breeze, promising a bountiful harvest. This is Freyr's domain, a realm of abundance, growth, and harmony. Unlike the dramatically born Dionysus, Freyr's origins are shrouded in mystery. He belongs to the Vanir, an ancient race of gods associated with nature, fertility, and wisdom. Legend has it that Freyr, along with his twin sister Freya, was sent to live with the Aesir, the main pantheon of Norse gods, as a hostage to seal a peace treaty. But Freyr's charm and benevolence soon made him one of the most beloved deities in Asgard. Picture a great hall in Asgard, its walls gleaming with gold and its rafters echoing with the laughter of gods. In walks Freyr, his presence immediately lightening the mood. He's often depicted as a strikingly handsome young man, with hair as golden as the wheat in his fields and eyes as blue as a midsummer sky. But it's not just his appearance that captivates. There's an aura of warmth and generosity about him that puts everyone at ease. Freyr's most famous possession is Skidbladnir, a magical ship that can fold up small enough to fit in a pocket, yet expand to carry all the gods of Asgard. In one famous myth, Freyr gives up his magical sword which could fight on its own for the love of a giantess named Gerd. This act of sacrifice for love showcases Freyr's gentle nature, but it also foreshadows his role in Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse. Now here's where things get really interesting. Despite being a god of peace, Freyr is destined to play a crucial role in the final battle at Ragnarok. Having given up his self-fighting sword, he's prophesied to fall in combat against the fire giant Surtur. But even in this violent end, Freyr's essence as a fertility god shines through. For after Ragnarok, when the world is reborn, it's said that Freyr's legacy will live on in the survivors who repopulate the earth. Here, in the realm of pyramids and hidden tombs, we encounter Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and the afterlife. If Dionysus represents the wild joy of life and Freyr the serene abundance of nature, Anubis embodies the profound mystery of what lies beyond. Close your eyes and imagine yourself standing before the Great Pyramid of Giza as the sun sets, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson. As darkness falls, a cool wind rises, carrying with it the whisper of ancient secrets. This is the hour when Anubis walks the earth, guiding souls on their journey to the afterlife. Unlike the more human-like Dionysus and Freyr, Anubis is often depicted with the head of a jackal, a creature associated with death due to its habit of scavenging in graveyards. But far from being a fearsome specter, Anubis was seen by the ancient Egyptians as a protector and guide, a compassionate presence in the face of life's greatest mystery. Imagine yourself as an ancient Egyptian, preparing for your journey into the afterlife. As your body is carefully mummified, prayers are offered to Anubis to ensure your safe passage. The god's skilled hands are believed to be at work, preserving your earthly vessel for its eternal rest. But Anubis's role doesn't end there. He's also the guardian of the scales of justice in the Hall of Two Truths, where each soul's heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the embodiment of truth and cosmic order. Picture this dramatic scene. You stand in a vast hall, its walls covered in vibrant hieroglyphs depicting the journey of the soul. Before you is a great golden scale. On one side, Anubis places a feather, on the other, your heart. The air is thick with tension as the balance wavers. This is the moment of judgment, where your earthly deeds are measured against the cosmic ideal of truth and harmony. If your heart is lighter than the feather, you're granted entry into the blissful fields of reeds. If not, well, let's just say the crocodile-headed Ammit, devourer of souls, is waiting nearby. This concept of divine judgment and cosmic justice sets Anubis apart from our other two gods. While Dionysus offers liberation through ecstasy and Freyr promises abundance in life, Anubis reminds us of the ultimate accountability we all face. His presence encourages us to consider the weight of our actions and the legacy we'll leave behind. He was often invoked for healing and protection in life, not just in death. Ancient Egyptians would wear amulets bearing his image for good health and to ward off evil. This connection between the Lord of Death and the preservation of life hints at a profound truth: that understanding and accepting our mortality can lead to a fuller, more authentic way of living. Each, in his own way, deals with transformation. Dionysus through the altering of consciousness, Freya through the cycles of nature, and Anubis through the ultimate transformation of death. Each offers a different perspective on how to navigate the mysteries of existence, reminding us of the multifaceted nature of the divine and of our own souls. Their stories continue to resonate across the millennia, offering us fresh insights into our own lives and the world around us. If you've enjoyed this mythological journey, don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who loves delving into ancient mysteries, and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of the divine and the human. Now turn to the mysterious forces that govern fate itself. Imagine a world where your life is a thread, carefully spun, measured, and cut by mysterious figures working behind the scenes. Sound intriguing? Well, that's exactly what we're about to uncover as we compare the Greek fates, the Norse norns, and the Egyptian Shai. These cosmic weavers have captured the imagination of people for thousands of years, and today we're going to find out why. Let's start our journey in ancient Greece, where three sisters known as the Fates, or Moirai, ruled over the destinies of both gods and mortals. Picture three elderly women sitting in a dimly lit room, surrounded by countless threads, each representing a life. First, we have Clotho, whose name means spinner. With her spindle, she creates the thread of life for every being that comes into existence. As she works, she hums a gentle tune, bringing new lives into the world with each turn of her magical tool. Next is Lachesis, the allotter. She measures the thread of life, deciding how long each person or god will live. Imagine her carefully stretching out each thread, her wise eyes determining the length of days each being will enjoy. Finally, there's Atropos, the unturnable. Her role is perhaps the most feared, for she's the one who cuts the thread when a life is meant to end. With her shears always at the ready, Atropos makes the final, irreversible decision. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The Fates were so powerful that even the mighty Zeus, king of the gods, was said to be subject to their decisions. Can you imagine that? The thunderbolt-wielding ruler of Olympus, having to accept the Fates' decrees just like any mortal. There's a famous story about a hero named Meleager. When he was born, the Fates appeared to his mother and pointed to a log burning in the fireplace. They declared that Meleager would live only as long as that log remained unburned. His mother quickly doused the flames and hid the log away. Years later, in a moment of anger, she threw the log into a fire, unknowingly ending her son's life. This tale shows how the Fates' decrees were thought to be inescapable, no matter how clever humans tried to be. Now, let's travel north to the frosty realms of Norse mythology. Here, we meet the Norns, three mysterious women who share some similarities with the Greek Fates, but with their own unique twist. The Norns live at the base of Yggdrasil, the great world tree that connects all realms of existence. Every day, they draw water from the well of Erd and use it to water Yggdrasil, keeping the cosmic tree healthy and vibrant. But that's not all they do. Like the Fates, the Norns are weavers of destiny. However, instead of spinning thread, they carve runes into the trunk of Yggdrasil, etching the fates of gods and humans alike into the very structure of the universe. The three main Norns are named Erd, Verdandi, and Skuld. Erd represents the past, Verdandi the present, and Skuld the future. Together they weave what the Norse called word, a concept that's a bit like fate, but with more complexity and nuance. Imagine Erd, ancient and wise, her fingers tracing the grooves of past events in Yggdrasil's bark. Verdandi, always alert and active, carving the runes of the present moment. And Skuld, her eyes distant, seeing possibilities that haven't yet come to pass, her knife poised to shape what's to come. One of the most fascinating things about the Norns is that they're not just dealing with individual fates, they're managing the destiny of the entire cosmos. In Norse mythology, even the gods aren't immune to fate. The Norns know about Ragnarok, the great battle at the end of the world, where many gods will die, but they don't share this knowledge freely. They let events unfold as they must. There's a story about the god Odin, who was so desperate to understand the future that he sacrificed one of his eyes in exchange for a drink from the well of Erd. He gained great wisdom, but even he couldn't change what the Norns had decreed. It just goes to show that in the Norse world, knowledge and power don't always mean control over one's destiny. For our final stop, we're heading to the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt. Here, we encounter a concept of fate that's quite different from what we've seen so far. Meet the Shai, Not a group of three, but a multitude of deities, each one responsible for an individual's destiny. Imagine having your very own destiny god, following you from birth to death, shaping your life's path. That's what the ancient Egyptians believed in. The word Shai can be translated as fate or destiny, but it also means that which is ordained. Unlike the Greek fates or Norse Norns, who dealt with everyone's destinies, each person had their own Shai. This personal deity was thought to be present at your birth, staying with you throughout your life, guiding your steps and influencing your choices. The Shai weren't distant, unapproachable beings. Ancient Egyptians believed they could communicate with their Shai through prayer and offerings. They might ask for guidance, protection, or even try to negotiate a better fate. It was a much more personal, intimate relationship with destiny than we've seen in the other mythologies. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Shai weren't all-powerful. They worked alongside other forces like the god of creation, Khnum, who was said to mold each person on his potter's wheel, and the goddess Meskenet, who breathed life into newborns and announced their destiny. There's a fascinating story from an ancient Egyptian text called the Tale of the Doomed Prince. In this tale, a prince is born, and the Hathors, goddess-like beings similar to the Shai, decree that he will die by a crocodile, a snake, or a dog. The pharaoh, hearing this, tries to protect his son by keeping him isolated in a stone house in the desert. But as the prince grows up, he decides to face his fate head-on. He has adventures, narrowly escaping the crocodile and the snake. The tale ends abruptly, but it illustrates how Egyptians viewed fate as something that could perhaps be negotiated with, but ultimately unavoidable. This idea of a personal destiny deity adds a whole new dimension to our exploration of fate. It's not just about three cosmic beings deciding everything, but a vast network of individual gods, each one intimately involved with a single life. Now that we've met these fascinating beings, let's take a moment to compare them. What do they have in common, and how are they different? First, the similarities. All three cultures, Greek, Norse, and Egyptian, believed in supernatural beings who had some control over human destiny. They all saw fate as something woven or crafted, whether it was with thread, runes, or the molding of a life. But the differences are just as intriguing. The Greek fates and Norse Norns were trinities, groups of three with specific roles. The Egyptian Shai, on the other hand, were individual deities for each person. This reflects a more personal, customized view of fate in Egyptian culture. The level of interaction with humans also varied. The fates were distant, rarely interacting directly with mortals. The Norns were similarly aloof, dealing more with the big picture of cosmic destiny. But the Shai were intimately involved in individual lives, open to communication and negotiation. Another interesting difference is in how absolute their power was perceived to be. The Greek fates seemed almost untouchable. Even Zeus couldn't overrule them. The Norse Norns were similarly powerful, shaping even the destinies of gods. But in Egyptian belief, while the Shai were influential, they worked alongside other forces and could potentially be swayed by prayer and offerings. These differences tell us a lot about how each culture viewed the concept of destiny. Before the gods ruled, there were older, more primal beings, forces that represented the raw, untamed power of the universe. The Titans, ancient gods of Greek mythology, were the Jotnar, or giants of Norse mythology, are the ancient enemies of the gods. The Ennead, the group of 9 deities in Egyptian mythology, were the creators and rulers of the cosmos. We're comparing the Titans of Greek mythology, the Jotnar of Norse legends, and the Ennead of Egyptian lore. These aren't your average beings and monsters. No, these are the old guard, the primal forces. They're the grandparents and great-uncles of mythology. Picture this. Long before Zeus threw his first lightning bolt, before Athena was even a twinkle in her father's eye, the world was ruled by giants. These weren't just any giants, though. These were the Titans, and they were the original masters of the Greek universe. I'm talking about the children of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. These folks were huge, powerful, and let's be honest, a little bit dysfunctional as a family. Let me introduce you to some of the key players. First up, we've got Cronus. This guy was the leader of the Titans, and fun fact, he's also known as Father Time. But don't let that fool you into thinking he was some kindly old man with a long beard. Cronus was ruthless. When he heard a prophecy that one of his kids would overthrow him, did he maybe try family counseling? Nope. He decided the best course of action was was to eat his children. Talk about family drama. Then there's Rhea, Cronus' wife and sister. Yeah, Greek mythology is like that sometimes. She's the mother goddess, and let me tell you, she was not happy about her husband's baby-eating habit. She's the one who managed to save baby Zeus by tricking Cronus into eating a rock instead. Mother of the Year award, right there. We can't forget about Atlas, the guy who got stuck holding up the sky as punishment. Imagine the worst gym day of your life, and then imagine doing that forever. That's Atlas's life. And then there's Prometheus, the trickster titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. He's like the cool uncle of the Titan family, always looking out for us little mortals. But here's the thing about the Titans. They weren't just powerful, they were elemental. They represented the very forces of nature. Oceanus was the titan of the sea. Helios drove the sun across the sky each day, and Selene was the moon. These weren't just gods sitting on a mountaintop, they were the world itself. The Titans ruled for eons in what the Greeks called the Golden Age. Everything was peaceful. Sounds pretty sweet, right? But all good things must come to an end. And for the Titans, that end came in the form of Zeus and his siblings. Remember that baby that Rhea saved? Well, he grew up, freed his brothers and sisters from Cronus' stomach, gross I know, and started a war. This wasn't just any war though. This was the Titanomachy, a cosmic battle that lasted for 10 years. Imagine the biggest, most explosive superhero movie fight scene you've ever seen, then multiply that by about 1,000. Mountains were hurled as weapons, the sky and sea churned in chaos, and the very fabric of the universe was at stake. In the end, Zeus and the younger gods won. Most of the Titans were cast down into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld. Atlas got his sky-holding punishment and a new era began. But here's the interesting thing. Not all the Titans were bad guys. Some, like Prometheus, sided with the younger gods. Others, like Helios and Selene, just kept doing their jobs of being the sun and moon. The Greeks didn't see the world in black and white, and neither did their myths. So that's the Titans, primordial, powerful, and ultimately overthrown. But they left a lasting impact on Greek mythology and culture. Every time you look at a clock, you're seeing a little bit of Cronus. Every atlas you've ever used in geography class, you can thank the sky-bearing Titan for that name. The Titans remind us that even the mightiest can fall, and that the world is always changing. But they also show us the raw power of nature and the cosmos, something that never gets old, no matter how many new gods come along. Now let's head north, way north, to the frosty realms of Norse mythology. Here we find another group of primal beings who gave the gods a run for their money. The Jötnar, often called giants in English. But trust me, there's so much more than that. First things first, let's get one thing straight. When we say giants, don't just picture big humans. The Jötnar could be huge, sure, but they could also be normal-sized or even shapeshifters. They're more like forces of nature, wild and unpredictable, than just big folks. The Jötnar come from Jotunheim, one of the 9 worlds in Norse cosmology. Picture a place of ice and stone, of towering mountains and deep, dark forests. It's not a cozy place like Asgard, home of the gods. Jotunheim is harsh, primal, and dangerous, just like its inhabitants. Let's meet some of these fascinating beings. First up, we've got Ymir, the first being in existence. This guy wasn't just big, he was the size of a world. Literally. The Norse believed that the entire world was made from Ymir's body after he was killed by Odin and his brothers. His flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains, and his skull became the dome of the sky. Talk about leaving a lasting impression. Then there's Loki. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't Loki one of the gods? Well, yes and no. Loki's actually a Jotun who managed to schmooze his way into Asgard. He's the ultimate trickster, causing trouble wherever he goes. One day he's helping the gods, the next he's causing Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse. He's like that friend who's fun to hang out with, but always gets you into trouble. We can't forget Skadi, the Jotun goddess of winter and mountains. She's proof that not all Jötnar were enemies of the gods. She actually married one of them, though it didn't work out great. Skadi's tough as nails, an expert hunter and skier. Imagine a cross between an Olympic athlete and Mother Nature, and you're on the right track. Another important Jotun is Jörmungandr, the world serpent. This massive snake is so big it encircles the entire world, holding its own tail in its mouth. It's one of Loki's kids? Don't ask, and it's destined to fight Thor during Ragnarok. Talk about family issues. Now, unlike the Titans, the Jotnar weren't overthrown in one big war. Instead, they're in a constant state of conflict with the gods, particularly Thor. In fact, most of Thor's famous adventures involve him traveling to Jotunheim to fight giants. It's like a cosmic game of whack-a-mole, with Thor's hammer as the mallet. But here's where it gets really interesting. The lines between gods and Jotnar are way blurrier than you might think. Odin, the head honcho of the Norse gods, his mother was a Jotun. Thor, the giant slayer himself, his mother was also a Jotun. It's a bit like finding out your favorite superhero is half alien. This blurring of lines shows us something important about Norse mythology. It's not a simple good versus evil story. The Jotnar represent the wild, untamed forces of nature. Sometimes that's destructive, sure, but it's also the source of wisdom and power. In fact, the gods often turn to the Jotnar when they need knowledge or magical items. Odin, always on the hunt for more wisdom, frequently deals with the giants. It's a risky game, but one that shows the complex relationship between order and chaos in Norse belief. The Jotnar are also tied to the concept of fate in Norse mythology. Remember Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods? The Jotnar play a big role in that. It's prophesied that they'll join forces with Loki and other chaotic beings to challenge the gods in a final battle. Talk about holding a grudge. But even this isn't a simple good versus evil scenario. Ragnarok isn't just an end, it's also a new beginning. After the great battle, the world is reborn, with both gods and giants playing a part in the new creation. So the Jotnar aren't just enemies to be defeated. They're not evil. They're elemental, essential parts of the world. They represent the parts of nature and existence that can't be fully controlled or understood. They're the wilderness beyond the boundaries of civilization, the mysteries that lie in the depths of the oceans and the heights of the mountains. In many ways, the Jotnar remind us that the world is bigger and wilder than we can imagine. Now let's journey south to the sun-baked lands along the Nile. Here, in ancient Egypt, we find our third group of primordial powers, the Ennead. But don't let that fancy name fool you. At its heart, the Ennead is a family story, filled with all the drama, love, and conflict you'd expect, just with godly powers thrown into the mix. First off, what's an Ennead? It's a fancy word that basically means a group of 9. In this case, it refers to 9 of the most important deities in ancient Egyptian religion. But trust me, their story involves way more than just 9 gods. Let's start at the beginning, and I mean the very beginning. In Egyptian mythology, before there was anything, there was none, the primordial waters of chaos. From these waters emerged Atum, the first god. Now, Atum was lonely, as you might expect, being the only thing in existence, so he decided to create some company. How did Atum create the other gods? Well, let's just say the ancient Egyptians had some interesting ideas about divine reproduction. Some versions say he sneezed and spat out the first 2 gods. Others say, well, let's keep this family friendly and move on. These first 2 gods were Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture. They in turn had 2 children, Geb, earth, and Nut, sky. Are you keeping track? Because this family tree is about to get complicated. Geb and Nut had 4 children, and these are the gods most people think of when they think Egyptian mythology: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Add in Atum, sometimes replaced by Ra, the sun god, and you've got your Ennead. Now, if you thought the Titans had family drama, buckle up, because the Ennead takes it to a whole new level. Let's start with Osiris and Isis. These 2 were not just siblings, but also husband and wife. Again, mythology is weird like that sometimes. Osiris was the first king of Egypt, teaching humans about agriculture and civilization. Isis was his devoted wife, known for her wisdom and magical powers. Everything was going great until their brother Seth got jealous. Seth was the god of chaos and the desert, and he didn't like how popular Osiris was. So he did what any reasonable person would do: he murdered his brother. But wait, it gets weirder. Seth didn't just kill Osiris, he chopped him into pieces and scattered them all over Egypt. Isis, being the devoted wife she was, went on a quest to gather all the pieces of her husband and resurrect him. And she succeeded. Mostly. Let's just say Osiris came back, but he wasn't quite fit for the world of the living anymore. This is where Horus comes in. Horus is the son of Isis and Osiris, born after Osiris was resurrected. Don't think too hard about it. And he's out for revenge. The battle between Horus and Seth for the throne of Egypt is one of the most famous stories in Egyptian mythology. This wasn't just a quick fight either. Their conflict lasted for decades, with neither side able to gain a clear advantage. At one point, Seth tore out one of Horus's eyes, while Horus, well, let's just say he gave as good as he got. Family counseling was clearly not a thing in ancient Egypt. Eventually, the other gods got tired of the fighting and held a trial to decide who should rule. After much debate and some sneaky tricks from Isis, Horus was declared the rightful king. Seth was banished to the desert, and order was restored to Egypt. But here's the thing. Even though Seth was the bad guy of this story, he wasn't banished completely. The Egyptians recognized that chaos and disorder were necessary parts of the universe. Seth was still worshipped, especially in the desert regions and by the army. He was seen as a powerful protector against the forces of true chaos. This idea, that even destructive forces have their place in the grand scheme of things, is a common thread we see in many mythologies. The Egyptians understood that the world isn't black and white, and their gods reflected that complexity. Now you might be wondering, what about the other gods in the Ennead? Well, they all had their roles to play. Nephthys, Seth's wife and sister, often helped Isis. Shu and Tefnut kept the sky, Nut separated from the earth, Geb. And Atum, or Ra, ruled over everything as the sun god. But the Ennead wasn't just about these 9 gods. Egyptian religion was complex and ever-changing, with different cities and time periods having their own variations on the myths. Gods could merge, split, or change roles depending on the needs of the people worshipping them. For example, Ra, the sun god, was often merged with other gods. You might hear of Amun-Ra, or Ra-Horakti. This wasn't seen as contradictory, it was just different aspects of the divine showing themselves in different ways. The Ennead also played a crucial role in Egyptian ideas about kingship and the afterlife. The pharaoh was seen as the living Horus, with the duty of maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order and balance of the universe. When a pharaoh died, they became one with Osiris, ruling the underworld. This connection between the gods and everyday life was crucial in Egyptian culture. The Ennead weren't distant, unreachable beings. They were intimately involved in the workings of the world and the lives of humans. The yearly flooding of the Nile, so crucial to Egyptian agriculture, was seen as the tears of Isis mourning for Osiris. The sun's daily journey across the sky was Ra sailing in his boat, fighting off the forces of chaos each night to be reborn in the morning. In this way, the story of the Ennead wasn't just a myth, it was a way of understanding the world. The conflicts between the gods reflected the struggles of human life. The cycle of death and rebirth embodied by Osiris gave hope for an afterlife. The eventual triumph of Horus over Seth showed that, in the end, order would prevail over chaos. The Ennead, with all its complex relationships and dramatic stories, gives us a window into how the ancient Egyptians saw the world. It's a story of cosmic forces, yes, but also a very human story of family, conflict, and the search for meaning in an often chaotic universe. Each of these groups of ancient powers reflects something unique about the culture that created them. The Titans show us the Greek reverence for the forces of nature and the cyclical view of history. The Jutnar embody the Norse understanding of the constant struggle between the wild and the civilized. And the Ennead gives us a glimpse into the Egyptian view of cosmic order and the intertwining of divine and earthly power. In the end, these ancient powers aren't just relics of the past. They're part of our shared human heritage, stories that continue to captivate and inspire us thousands of years after they were first told. They remind us that the world is full of wonder and mystery, and that there's always more to discover. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining. Who knows? Maybe someday, your stories will be the ones people are talking about thousands of years from now. This is Hermes Mythology signing off. Please subscribe to support the channel and give it a like, share, and comment your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious, and may the ancient powers inspire you to greatness. See you in the next video.